I got a very special guest with me, my buddy from the Athletic, and he's been covering the Cowboys for a very long time. John Machota, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Dude, John, you don't know this, but training camp videos, just the work you do, it really holds the Cowboys community down. I remember us talking last year. It was like we hit it off. And I told you that if I needed you, I'd be giving you a call.
Yeah.
I need you. We're during the dead period. I'm giving you a call. And John, what an offseason. Like seriously, it's been the up and downs of the Green Bay game, the draft pick, Cowboys fans not happy. Then there starts to be some buildup of maybe okay, we could turn this thing around, and then the CD stuff, and we'll get to some of that. But first of all, how are you doing? What's new? I want to do a check in first, and then we'll get to football.
So, I mean, my life is basically built around covering the Cowboys.
Yeah.
I live like 5 minutes down the street from the practice facility, and this is definitely the slowest time for sure. This is the time when most writers are trying to get in their vacation because we don't take vacation during the season, and so it's usually right before training camp starts. And so, uh, little surprised that they didn't get any of these contracts done. Little surprised they didn't do more in free agency. I thought there'd be I didn't think they'd do a lot in the offseason. I thought they would have done a little bit more. And so that's got me a little bit surprised with just how it's been, by Cowboy standards, from my perspective, a little bit more quiet than some previous off seasons. But, with training camp starting, obviously that starts a new season. And usually that's kind of a fresh start. There's a lot of energy then at that time of year. But even going into camp, I mean, we go into camp and there's not a CD deal done, and he's not going to be there then. That's going to be a huge storyline. And so it's going to be interesting. This is going to be a fascinating training camp for sure.
Yeah, and I think, man, John, with everything that's happened, the Micah, just last week, Micah and and Hooker, they're not really like, I won't say they weren't on the same page. Micah tweets, deletes. I kind of like, man, can Camp just hurry up? And I'll say this about CD, and we'll talk about him later as well. But I don't think there's any way that Dallas plays a football game without 88, like not one. And so if there's a line drawn in the sand, I do believe that the Joneses will have to give in. I don't want to get into how I feel about the Joneses. I don't do that here because I honestly think that to me, people can say what they want about the roster, but I don't think the roster is awful. Now, there could be some changeover if McCarthy doesn't get it done, and we'll get into that as well. But to act like the Joneses are just doing a terrible job team building was like, no, that's Carolina, that's Atlanta, that's the Raiders, that's the Browns. Not the Browns. Browns pretty good, but you get what I'm saying. We can't act like the Cowboys haven't had good roster. So I don't want to just act like they're awful. And I do believe that CD does get done. To me, John.
Yeah, no, I do too. But yeah, you bring up a good point because me being a guy from Detroit, I mean, I've seen a lot of really bad football, from the Lions for a long time. And there was a long time where they, no question, them, Cleveland, one of the bottom five franchises in the league for a while. And so I know how bad can be. And so you are absolutely right. It's a fine line you got to kind of walk. And I find that with a lot of the storylines with the Cowboys right now. And that's whether you talk about Dak or CD or Micah, or you talk about the Joneses. Like everybody's got to do better. There's really not anybody
Yeah.
that's sitting there and going like, no, I'm good. I'm doing my job. I mean, okay, I've said this to some other people, and they mentioned Brandon Aubrey. Okay, that's fine. Okay, Brandon Aubrey's doing his job, but like, I mean, last year's draft wasn't great, so you can look at anybody in the front office. They haven't made any moves to really add anybody. You can look at the front office. The coaching staff obviously laid an egg against Green Bay. Dak didn't have his best game against Green Bay. Micah has trailed off at the end of seasons. CD is coming off in a monster year, but I'm sure there's even some things that he feels like he could do better. So there is a fine line because while you want to be critical, especially coming off that Green Bay loss, you also can't sit there and be like, "Oh, this team's going to win 5 games." I mean, they're not. That's not. They're as long as guys stay healthy, they're not going to be one of those type of teams. And so it's funny because in this profession of covering teams, they're kind of in a spot where you're kind of in the middle, and it's kind of sucks sometimes being there because if things are really bad, there's a lot of interest, and then obviously if things are rolling, that's the most interest that you get. And so when you just have these seasons over and over again, where just there's fans looking around kind of like, why am I buying all in this year when I kind of know how this is going to end? But you really don't, and that's what makes the NFL so great. That's what makes following the Cowboys so interesting because you really don't know what to expect.
John, you hit it on the head, man. And the doom and gloom around free agency. Sometimes to me, it bothers me because I say this. I say, have the Cowboys had rosters that were good enough to win some of these games? The answer is yes, John. To me, that the Green Bay game was a schematical issues. It was guys running wide open. It was Dak. I love Dak, but for some reason he's playing his worst football in the biggest games. I don't know if that's Mike needing to have a different approach. I don't know if he's trailing off at the end of the year. I don't know what it is. And then obviously Dan Quinn, like I've said this all off season, John, there was no point in that Green Bay game that I thought the Dallas would get a stop. Not one. And so, but the roster and the players to me are good enough. And, you bring in Zimmer. I think that some of that could be cleaned up. Would you agree?
It absolutely can. I mean, let's be honest. You don't win 12 games in a row for 3 straight seasons just because. No, I mean, it's just an okay roster. The coaches just schemed it up. They just schemed it up. It's kind of like it goes to the whole like where everybody deserves some blame. I talking to some old heads that have been down here and covered the team longer than I have. They find it so easy to just blame it on Jerry, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's fine. Hey, he deserves a ton of blame. But like they win 12 games each of the last 3 years. Like, so what does he do different right when the playoffs start? Tell me what that is. Are there more tours at the Star? Is he doing? Are there more media availability? Is there more Netflix documentaries being done? No, they're being done all season. Why all of a sudden does it happen in January that all of a sudden this falls apart? And so that's where it's like I can't really put all the blame there. It's the same thing with McCarthy. Like, is it all McCarthy's obviously brought in to win playoff games? That's why they moved on from Jason Garrett. He wasn't getting it done in the postseason. That's why you bring in Mike McCarthy. And while you can sit there and go, well, it probably is time to move on from Mike McCarthy. He hasn't won in the playoffs. At the same time, he's had sustained success for 3 seasons. Yeah. That Kansas City is the only team that's had more success during that time. And just look through recent Cowboys history. Like, it's just up and down, up and down, up and down. He's had consistent success for 3 straight seasons. There's something to be said there. So it's so difficult. And I know fans and even, media, and I'm sure the players feel the same way. You hate it when you can't just point to the one thing. Those really successful shows that, sports talk, debate shows and everything like that. They love to just like, you're going to argue this point, I'm going to argue this point, and that's going to be it. It's like, it's very rarely ever that. It's so many different things. This Cowboys team, the reason that they haven't been to a Super Bowl in 28 years, obviously Jerry Jones holds that biggest part of the pie, but you can't say it's just him, because if it was just him, I can tell you exactly what it would look like. I grew up watching the Matt Millen Detroit Lions. That's what it would look like. If it's just Jerry Jones, that's what it would look like. Every year, top 5 pick. Top 5 pick doesn't pan out. Another top 5 pick. Top 5 pick, another top 5 pick doesn't pan out. It's not that level. So that's the part that makes this team so fascinating to cover, because if you were that bad, you would never, in this league of parity, you would never roll off 12 wins, and 12 wins like that. There's just no way. That roster last year, I think that's the best Cowboys roster since the 90s years. Like, that team was ready to roll, and it just all fell apart. I felt like everything was lining up perfectly for them, getting home field, and they played so well at home for the last 2 seasons. I was like, man, they're getting a gift. It's going to be them and the Niners in the NFC Championship game. That's why Troy Aikman talks about how he didn't book a vacation at that time, because he thought for sure that's what it was going to be. And so I do like the hindsight of it, as so many people look at, the team wasn't that good. No, the team was really good. That's why the Green Bay loss might be the worst loss in Cowboys franchise history, because that team was good. That wasn't put together with like duct tape and Windex and, hey, somehow we got here. No, that was a really damn good team. That's why losing that opportunity and blowing that opportunity hurts so much for the Cowboys, because they know what they had there.
Oh, man, John, you completely brought your fastball, and I appreciate this because there's so many people, there's so many talking heads the low-hanging fruit is Jerry Jones. Well, I tell you, and, I had my buddy Landon McCool on earlier in the offseason, and he said it. There's something to be said about the quarterback. We're going to get to him later in this talk, but everybody playing their worst football at the wrong time, there's something to be said about that, and maybe it could be, a Zimmer change with his discipline and all like that. And listen,
Let me cut you off real quick, because I want to just touch on something that you said there. What's so fascinating to me about that too?
Talk about it.
I was telling we were at like mini camp practice, this year, and I was telling Todd Archer from ESPN about this. I go, you know what's so fascinating about this whole dropping off the cliff in the playoffs? Shouldn't the Dallas Cowboys be more prepared for the playoffs than anyone?
Oh
Every
my
game that
God.
they play during the regular season gets the most TV views, has the most people watching it. For the following week, has the most people talking about it. I just watched this great podcast with Armando Baycott from North Carolina, and he was just talking about how like when North Carolina played Duke, like that during that week, the media is just so crazy, and I can see how it builds up because it's Carolina Duke. For the Cowboys, that's every week.
Yeah.
Whether they win, lose, it's not only the games are being watched, but it's dissected that entire upcoming week. So it's not like, there's some teams where it's like, hey, they just had an amazing year, and you're kind of like, where did this come from? And then they crumble in the playoffs. It's like, no, the Cowboys have a roster full of guys that have played in big games where they're being scrutinized all the time, and then all of a sudden they get to the playoffs and it's win or go home. And like you said, they just do not play their best for whatever reason.
Oh man, it really, the Green Bay game was so deflating, John. I literally had no answers. It was just like, wow. You know what I mean? And so they should be prepared, John, or not. And you said something about Detroit. You said something about picks. I want to get into this draft really quick, John, because we are talking about, I want to talk about this roster and your 10 most important players because you did a great job with this write up. And I actually want to not challenge you, but I want to ask why for a few players and why you have them ranked where, because it was a really good write up. That being said, the Guyton pick, it like Cowboys fashion, was definitely one of the more polarizing picks because you had people who, no, this guy can't play, and I don't like it. And Dallas was able to trade back and draft him. And they obviously parlayed him with Cooper Beebe. But Machota, I want to ask you, just give me 2 draft picks who you've been out there, you've watched practices, you talked to these coaches, you talked to the training staff, you talked to the scouts. Give me 2 picks, John, that you say these 2 picks are gonna be something. And I don't. If they don't hit, it's okay, John. You're not gonna be married to this, to your point. But I will say this: last year's draft was awful, and Will hasn't had a lot of awful drafts, but it was awful. Whether it be injury, Mazi just wasn't good enough. And I'm a Mazi guy. I stood on the table for Mazi, John. Give me 2 guys this year.
Hey, you're not alone. There's a lot of people in that organization that sit on the table for Mazi. Um, if you're talking about
From what you've seen,
for this season,
yeah.
oh, I could see where none of them even do that much this season. I mean, just being
Really?
completely honest. Oh yeah, no, this has the possibility of being just like last year's class where you don't get a ton from it. Now, long term wise, I think this. I would be surprised if BB and Guyton don't hit. I just
Okay.
think that with both of them, both moving positions. BB going to center, Guyton going to left tackle. I just think there's could be some growing pains early on that you could probably withstand a little bit more if it's just one rookie starting as opposed to 2. And maybe Brock Hoffman ends up being great in camp and in preseason. Maybe Brock Hoffman wins the starting center job and they feel good about that. Or maybe Cooper Beebe does and maybe he looks like a seasoned vet, or maybe Guyton does. But as I sit here right now, I just think there's going to be some growing pains there. And I really think for this year, just if we're talking about the 2024 season, those are the two guys you look at. Now, Marshawn Nealon is going to get opportunities, with Dante Fowler gone and Dorrance Armstrong gone. There's going to be opportunities for him. But one, let's be honest, the Cowboys' second-round picks, there just isn't a great batting average
Track
there.
record
I
is
mean, if
awful.
it isn't for Trayvon Diggs, it looks real bad in the second round. So
Yeah.
it's kind of one of those things where you're like, you see an upside there. I thought it was a great pick when they made it. I thought he was clearly, one of the best players available there. So
Dane loved him. Your colleague
yeah,
Dane Brugler loved him.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have no questions with them taking him. I just don't know if it's going to hit immediately. And this is a team that with them not doing much in free agency, you kind of need some of these guys to come in and play bigger roles. And so out of those guys, I think those top 3 are your best chance to really come in and make a move because there's just the rest of the guys I think are special teams types contributors, guys that maybe be something down the road. I just don't know if, I don't know if you have a Duran Bland or somebody that's going to come in immediately and be like, wow. And let's be honest, this time at this time of year during Duran Bland's rookie season, I never would have said this. I mean, I remember being out of training camp and I thought he played well, but I was like, man, he's so far in this depth chart. Like he'll make the roster, obviously, but whatever. And I remember doing an interview with a reporter who was from Fresno, which is where he played college ball. And I remember talking to her and being like, she wanted like some deep breakdown of like how he can make an impact immediately. And I'm like, I think the best thing for him is he's going to be around a lot of veterans, and I think by year 2 or 3, and then lo and behold, I mean, Deron Bland came on the scene, and you were like, damn, Deron Bland is a baller, you know? And so I'm not saying that can't happen, but just sitting here being honest with you today, the other part that factors in with this too is really one reason why I absolutely love the training camp, but then the other reason is just why I understand fans want so much out of minicamp and OTAs. Man, every year that goes by, these guys do less and less that you can take away from OTAs and minicamp. And it's by design, man. The players union doesn't want these guys going out there and hitting and doing stuff like that. Anything that even gets close to being physical are usually what ends up leading to, like you've seen in the past, where teams lose practices, the league fines them, things like that, which has happened in McCarthy since he's been the Cowboys coach. And so it's so difficult to sit there and really make a big leap in a big, projection off of that. That's why training camp's so great, because you're going to see pads come on, and you're going to see Guyton have to do whatever he can to try and slow down Micah Parsons, where you're just not seeing anything like that in an OTA or minicamp setting nowadays. It used to be like that, but you don't get it anymore. But if I'm just saying, hey, have patience. Even if Guyton and BB aren't the guy right away, as critical as anybody can be about the Cowboys, about anything they want, it's fine. But you have to say that they've done a good job when it comes to drafting offensive linemen, particularly in the first round. I don't think anybody at this time, a couple years ago, thought Tyler Smith would immediately jump out and be the player he was, and it worked out great for him. And so I think Guyton and BB are doing all the right things, just down the road here with the O-line masterminds. I mean, they're working out with Duke Manyweather, carrying over what they got from OTAs and minicamp so that they hit the ground running in training camp. They're doing all the right things. You talk to them, they say all the right things. They seem like they're wired the right way, much like Tyler Smith was, his rookie year. So I just can't sit here and tell you right now I would bet a ton of money on any of them, because I just think that there's still a lot of projecting that has to come.
Man, John, I appreciate the honesty. I'm a draft guy, so I'm like, oh man, this guy can do it. But I get it. You know what I mean? You're around it. You know it. You've seen it. And I'll be honest with you. Even hearing Mike McCarthy came out and say this was the best. These guys have done literally everything and above and beyond that we could have asked for. So I'm with you. If they can just do their job and you deal with the growing pains, you deal with the growing pains. Because I do believe this. Hey, Tyler Guyton week 1 will be out there barring health. And he's gonna get beat. They'll probably keep a tight end over there. They'll chip. They'll shade protection his way. All those types of things. And you know what? I will say this, John. To be fair, I remember Tyler Smith training at guard all offseason. Tyron takes a step wrong. He kicks out the tackle. Doesn't miss a beat. So crazier things have happened, and like you said, Dallas does a great job with development tackles, guards. I mean, hell, TJ Bass hit. Or he can be something. And so I'm with you there.
People are still scared about the whole Chaz Green situation. This coaching staff and even that coaching staff knows they made a mistake, and they should have never have left him on that island in Atlanta. And so, but I understand when Cowboys fans have some PTSD from that, thinking like, oh man, what if they put Guyton out there and it's just like a Chaz Green? That's not going to happen. And now what would happen, like you said, chipping with backs and tight ends, what happens is it'll limit a little bit of your offense, but they're not just going to leave Dak out there to just get killed like he did in Atlanta that night or that afternoon. So just rest assured, give the coaching staff a little bit of credit that if he has some trouble, they're gonna come up with some things. It just what'll happen is it might end up slowing down the offense. You might have to use a Lipke a little bit more, or somebody else that to stay in and block. So, but I really do think that Guyton's wired the right way. I just think it might take him some time, because, I mean, he's going to get thrown to the wolves immediately, and it's going to be important for him to keep his confidence up. I mean, whether you talk about going up against Mike every day in training camp or going against Myles Garrett in week 1, like he's getting thrown to the wolves. So don't think that you're getting Tyron Smith. That's why he was drafted in the 20s. Those offensive tackles that can step in right away. That's a little bit different. That's why they go top 5, top 10. So there's a little bit more projecting here.
Man, great stuff. And, I didn't think we'd be talking about University of Florida legend Chaz Green. Okay, moving on, John. Let's get right into your list. And with number 10, most important players for the Dallas Cowboys in 2024, you went Jalen Tolbert. You had a few other names that you could have went. I liked mentioning DeMarvin Overshown, who I talked to Brian Broaddus yesterday. He's telling me Overshown is going to play a big role in this defense. Tell me why you went Jalen Tolbert, and do you see him being your receiver 3, possibly growing into a receiver 2 this year?
It's going to be tough for him to go in a receiver 2 this year just because, well, I mean, barring health. If CD and
Yeah,
Cooks are, I just think, to me, like when I look at this entire roster, just not at wide receiver, just like when I look in the passing game, I just feel like CD, Cooks, and Jake Ferguson are just so cemented in. I just don't see anybody else on the roster overtaking. Like I feel confident those three stay healthy at the end of the year. When you look at the Cowboys stats for the 2024 season, I feel like those are going to be your top 3 in targets. So now you drop down who's that next guy, and I think that not only does Tolbert have the skills to be that guy, it's kind of like one of those things where the team wants him to win that role. I mean, that's why they drafted him where they did. That's why they see the upside in him, and he's progressing. And so ultimately, that's what their hope is. That's, you move on from Michael Gallup. You're hoping that Tolbert steps in and you can get a full season of him being a number 3 receiver that you can really count on. And so I think that's going to be important because I think that I do believe, like you said earlier, that even if CD missed all of training camp, I still would bet most of the money that I have that he'll be there week 1. I don't see him sitting out games during the season, so I imagine he'll be there week 1. And so when that happens, though, so many teams are going to be just focused on let everybody else beat you. We're not letting CD beat us. And so when that happens, that's why Tolbert's going to have so many. He's going to be put in so many situations to really kind of take over and potentially have a big game that could be the difference in winning and losing a big ball game. And so that's why I gave him the edge. But like I said, I mentioned Overshown and some other guys just because I can totally understand the argument. You want to go to Marvion Overshown? Believe me, that coaching staff, that Dan Quinn staff, they had high hopes for Marvion Overshown. I mean, there was no doubts about that. They said it before he got hurt, and they certainly said it after the season was over. But he got injured, and so they had to go in a different direction. But yeah, if you told me that he ended up being this huge playmaker on defense, that wouldn't shock me at all.
Man, okay. So moving right along, you went Jake Ferguson at 9, and then you went DeMarcus Lawrence at 8. I want to ask you this because you mentioned Jake Ferguson. I actually see a world where he has, I wouldn't say receiver 2 numbers, but like he came on the scene, and it's like this guy is a one of one, and maybe a kid with top 5 potential in the NFL as far as the tight end. Talk about Jake Ferguson. Do you see him continuing to get better, John? And then talk about DeMarcus Lawrence, who to me is the ageless wonder, and it could be really one of the reasons why Mike Zimmer has a easy transition to this defense.
Yeah, I think just my times being around Ferguson over the last couple of years, like you can just see his confidence growing. And I think that it's one thing to do it during practice, but you start seeing it throughout the season last year that, oh, no, he's ready for this, to take over. There were some questions about, oh, is he ready to take over that Dalton Schultz role? No, he's clearly ready for that. And it just him and Dak seemed to be on the same page. And Dak's had pretty good rapport with tight ends throughout his time in Dallas. And so he's done enough where he's earned, when I think of those top 3 guys I mentioned, when I say Ferguson, Cooks, and Lamb, like they have clearly earned Dak's trust. And so when that happens, I'm talking about throwing seam balls between 2 guys, like stuff where you're just like, you're not going to do that to certain players. Now, I will say Dak does have a penchant for, he has a lot of trust in a lot of guys, almost to a fault sometimes, but those 3 particularly, he has a lot of trust in it, and I just see that growing with Ferguson. So I had him there because of that, but I also had him there because I just see he, to me, is a lot higher up on the depth chart than that rest of the crew at tight end. Because I can tell you this right now, number 2 at tight end on this team, it could be 3 or 4 different guys, and it wouldn't surprise me. It could be Brevin Spanford. It could be Peyton Hendershot. It could be John Stevens Jr. It could be Schoonmaker. Like it could be. We just really don't know right now. I would bet on Schoonmaker if you told me he was healthy throughout camp. We just haven't seen him healthy since he's been a Cowboy. He stays healthy, he's the guy. But I just, without that health, I don't know. And then where's John Stevens off of his ACL injury? Because he did look good in training camp. He looked like he was trending towards. He was certainly going to make the roster. I don't know how much of a role he was going to have, but. And then same thing with Hendershot. Like, is he going to take his game to the next level? And they obviously love Spanford. I mean, he's the biggest investment they made, after the draft and free agency. So Ferguson just is head and shoulders above the rest of the group. That's why I feel he's so important.
Man, this is great stuff. And then okay, so rounding up with DeMarcus Lawrence at 8, and then you went Trayvon Diggs at 7. So with what you've seen out at practice with Diggs, Machota, I think people really forget just how good Trayvon Diggs was, but can he still be that good, John? Because we've seen these guys come back from these knees. I mean, I was watching film and I've been going through every Cowboys game. Chaz Green. I mean, now you got me saying Chaz Green. Terrence Steele, John.
Yeah.
It was really high and really low last year, and the lows were low. Do we see Diggs playing that way this year? And he comes back, doesn't miss a beat, or taking some time to get back.
Yeah, so at OTAs and minicamp, all we got to see was him on the cords, doing
Okay.
the rehab stuff. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if camp even might start out like where he starts out at camp where he's not doing full go, that he's working off to the side and stuff like that. Because let's be honest, you really don't need to see him doing stuff during training camp and preseason. You need him ready, as healthy as he possibly can be week one, because you need a lot from him. Especially Stephon Gilmore's gone now. They need Diggs and they need Bland to be outstanding. And as long as the knee's right, I think Diggs is fine. What'll be interesting to watch is that everything you hear about Zimmer is that there might not be as many big plays. Obviously, Dan Quinn's defenses, led the league multiple years in takeaways. There might not be as many of those, but they'll be more fundamentally sound as a group. So the trade-off is maybe you don't give up some monster runs to some low-level quarterbacks that are keeping the Arizona Cardinals in games that they shouldn't be in. So
Yeah.
maybe some of that trade, guys wide open in the secondary against Green Bay. Maybe some of that stuff gets taken away. So that's going to be interesting to watch with guys like Bland and Diggs, because those guys are ball hawks. And so are they going to be able to still take some gambles here or there? How's Zimmer going to coach those guys? Obviously, DB is his specialty.
His wheelhouse, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm interested to really watch how they're going to be utilized on the back end, because you do have two guys. When they're playing healthy and they're at their best, they take the ball away as well as anybody in the league. And so it's going to be an interesting position group to watch, because I do think that Zimmer's going to do some things a little bit different on the back end. So how does Diggs kind of adjust to that? But as long as he's healthy, I just think, yeah, Trayvon might give up some big plays here and there, but he's gonna make a ton of big ones too. And so I just think what he's going to bring to that defense, I think it was missed last year if he got hurt, and I think that's why it's also having him back is so important on this year's team.
I'll say this: the bridge between the DBs, Al Harris, and Mike Zimmer, to me, is going to keep us out of Dodge. Like, I feel like that is what is going to be needed. And Mike McCarthy played chess by keeping Al Harris on his staff. Al Harris is a smart dude. That room respects him. Those guys respect him. They speak higher of him, I feel like, than they did of Dan Quinn. And Dan Quinn's a player's coach, by the way. And so I just feel like that could be our saving grace. And John, when you think about it, outside of Xavier Rhodes, has Mike Zimmer had two corners? We're talking about two guys. The level of a Trayvon Diggs and the level of a Deron Bland. I don't think he has. And so I think that barring health, Diggs could have a nice season with Mike Zimmer. So I like that one on the list.
And when you mentioned those two guys as being DB guys, obviously with Al Harris and Mike Zimmer, a lot goes to with how can they get something out of Carson and Eric Scott? They invested picks in these guys. You're not bringing Gilmore back. You got Jordan Lewis in that mix. He's on a 1-year deal. It would be great for them if they can develop one of those guys to where, because it just really hasn't come together for Nahshon Wright. And so maybe with one of those guys, they start bringing them along, and then all of a sudden now you're like, man, they got, let's say, Eric Scott or Carson, and then they have Bland and Diggs, where it's like, not only does it look good right now, it looks good for the next 5+ years. That would be huge too. And to be honest, like, I don't know that you could ask for two better DB guys in the NFL right now to be coaching that position. So maybe they get something out of them. Maybe they get something out of the Gary and Conley that they signed out of the what's it called?
The Raiders.
You
have yeah.
I want to say USFL, but they changed the name. UFL, I think it is now. But but maybe they get something out of Conley too. So I don't know. But they got some good coaches, so maybe it works out for them.
Is that my dog, your dog?
No, I don't have one.
Oh, hey, stop. Stop. Well, this is live, so it's all good.
Yeah,
they'll respect this part of it. So that part, John, out the way. Mazi Smith, Eric Kendricks, next on your list, right? I will say this. I completely agree with you when it comes to Eric Kendricks. I wanted to hear why you said Mazi.
Oh, I think I could put Mazi at one, to be honest with you, because this is the way I look at training camp. Is all eyeballs are going to be on Trey Lance. He's going to be the guy that no matter whatever he does, he can throw a simple pass out into the flat. The eyeballs are going to be all on Lance, up and down, whatever happens, good, bad. But Mazi Smith is the one guy that if you could ask, I don't know whether you want to talk coaches, fans, or whatever, if you could have one player from the Cowboys have just an amazing camp that just comes out of nowhere and looks dominant, I can't think of anybody you would pick over Mazi Smith, because it just, if you have a Mazi Smith that looks like the monster he was at Michigan, that was on the top of the guy that covers college football so well for us here at The Athletic, Bruce Feldman, he does his freaks list every year, and Mazi was number one on that list a couple years ago because he's a physical freak. And if he looked like that in practices, and he looked like his get off was amazing, and he looked like he was wrecking shop in the middle of that defense, man, that just, it covers up so many things. The run defense, all of a sudden you start feeling like, whoa, you start looking at Micah, Demarcus Lawrence going, hey, wow, what could these guys do? Osa, everything, there's so much that falls into place if Mazi looks good, and it looks like, hey, the rookie year, it was a lot, the transition from college to pro isn't for everybody in that year one, but man, year two, this guy looks like the man. That would be so big for it would have impacts on this entire team. And so that's why he would be there. But I mean, I'm telling you, there's no way that you can do a top 10 list of most important players for the Cowboys this year with how little they did in free agency, and then losing Hankins, Neville Gallimore. Like, to have Mazi look good and play well, that covers up a lot of stuff, man. That could be the type of momentum type thing that could get you feeling a little bit different about this team than maybe people feel right now.
Now, John, and as my dog rudely, actually, I just thought about it. I'm babysitting my mom's dog, and I'm like, wait, is that my? Oh, shoot, she has like a little Bichon, and he's fighting with. He's doing something, I don't know, but we got him taken care of. So anyway, John, as I fight and as I'm like, you know what? I just thought about this, John. I can't be fake. I'm at like a 7 level of concern with Mazi.
Yeah,
and the reason why is, John, I'm not the play. Okay, I can live. His body looks small. Mm-hmm. What in the heck is going on? And John, you're an insider, so you guys are gonna get the truth from Machota. He doesn't lie. He's very well spoken when it comes to these things. John, what is going on? Why can't he keep weight on?
The coaches didn't tell him to lose that kind of weight. I saw that. I saw that circulating on social media throughout the offseason. No, that wasn't asked to him. I just think that the transition from college to pro has been a tough one for him, and then dealing with the shoulder injury and all that too. I think that he didn't immediately hit the ground running and having success. Obviously, as people point out, he was not getting off the ball fast enough. There's just no ways around that. And so I think he might have gotten his own head about it and started trying to change some things up. And no coach is going to ask a guy to lose that much weight. And now he's coming off the shoulder, and so you kind of wonder how is he going to put all that back on, and how is he going to look. And I'm with you. Like, just because I said that he's important for the team doesn't mean that I'm guaranteeing you that he's going to have this breakout game. I'm saying that would be huge for this team. But no, I'm skeptical right now. Like, I need to see him do something in training camp in the preseason to make me think that, oh no, they have an answer at defensive tackle. Because let's be honest, it's been too long for the Cowboys to not be good at that position. It's just been. I mean, Osa's a solid player, but he needs help, man. And they just have not been able to have good defensive tackle play. And then to not even be able to bring back Hankins is just such a major blow for this team. And so you look at the roster, you're like, well, who can take that next step? And Mazi has the talent to do it, but yeah, I have questions about it for sure.
Okay, yeah, and I'm just like, with the weight and the way he played double teams, I was on with Brian. I just very confused as to why it just looked bad at times. And like you said, hopefully he gets himself together. Hopefully he gets healthy, because now, okay, if Mazi starts off training camp and he's, not out there, then it's 2 weeks. And me and Brian talked about it. It's just 3 weeks. Now it's like, it's isn't trending well. And he's not just gonna. I mean, he's not good enough to just flip a switch week 1 and he's good. Like, that's not gonna happen.
And then the biggest problem with this is that you talk about, like, I think it's clearly defensive tackle and running back are their two weakest positions. You can go find somebody at running back, and it's not expensive. Defensive tackle, and teams aren't getting rid of good defensive tackles. It's so tough to get a guy that's established. And so, obviously, I think the Cowboys did the right thing by using the pick on Mazi. I mean, it's been too long since they've drafted a defensive tackle in the first round, and so I think that's the right idea. But the return on investment, just you got questions about it. But it is a position that, man, if Mazi doesn't look good and nobody else is really stepping up, how are they going to address that position? Because yeah, there will be defensive tackles available when teams trim down to their 53s, but they're probably not going to be any like major player. So now are you just kind of on that wheel again to where it's like, all right, well, we lost Hankins, so we got to go find another one and trade another, fifth, sixth round pick to try and get a Jonathan Hankins 3-4 weeks into the season because we just ain't got the dogs in the middle. Like that's not a great spot to be in either. And who knows if there's even a Hankins available at that point. And so I have concerns about defensive tackle. It's number one on my board, biggest concern position.
Okay, John, moving right along. I love what you said about Eric Kendricks. You wrote up some good stuff about him. I actually thought that he played really good football for the Chargers. They were just bad, and Brandon Staley just, his defense, some of the structures he ran. I mean, he wasn't able to maximize. This is a defensive guy. He wasn't able to maximize Derwin James. It was just a dumpster fire. But I do think that, San Fran wanted to bring Kendricks in. He flipped. I thought that was a good hit right there, John, because I think he's kind of like the forgotten player on the Cowboys and like that one sneaky free agent piece that, if nothing else, I mean, like I'm on with Brian and we're talking about, hey, could this linebacker core now be better that you have somebody in the middle? Because I did not think that. And listen, I like Damone Clark. I think he looks the part. I think he had all the great stuff. Obviously, he had the injury at LSU. Great player at LSU. The process didn't hit. He didn't see it. And he didn't go. I think that Kendrick, he definitely had that issue. He's been in the league a long time. He knows who's there. He knows who. That was a good one. You have anything to add about Kendrick?
I agree with you on the Niners thing. I just he didn't want to go there because, well, I mean, obviously he would have went there if the Cowboys weren't available. I mean, he obviously wants to win a championship and they have a great roster, but he would have been more of a reserve role. Whereas with the Cowboys, he's not only going to be a starter, but he's going to be the guy that a lot of these players are looking to on the field because he's going to know Mike Zimmer more than any of these other guys are. And so when the bullets are flying and these guys got questions about something where they're lining up on a certain play, this is the guy that can get you lined up right because he's very familiar with what Zimmer's going to want. And so I think that he just brings more value to the Cowboys than he would have brought to the Niners. So for me, I just think that's a great pickup by the Cowboys, one, but then two, I think it's a great situation for him because he's going to get a chance to, let's be honest, I mean, linebacker play, you go back, whatever it is, 3-4 years ago, it looked like, they were going to be solid at linebacker. When, you go from Sean Lee to Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith, you think like, hey, they got a good core here. They're about to, and the linebacker position's been a weakness for the Cowboys for too long. I mean, Leighton wasn't able to stay healthy, and so that was a big reason for that, I think. But they really need Eric Kendricks and Marvion Overshown to be healthy this season. I just think there's a drop off after those in terms of the upside of those two. Clark would be next. So, they need Eric Kendricks to be very good. They need him to stay healthy. That's for sure.
Yeah, and if you watch the Chargers tape, I thought he flashed. I thought that one thing that he did was play downhill, play forward. And it was just a lot of catching by the Cowboys linebackers. Okay, we talked about Tyler Guyton, who you have ranked at 4. You hit him earlier, and I like that ranking because he can't be a dumpster fire. But if he struggles but flashes, I think the Cowboys will be okay. I want to get to this big 3. And this is where me and you may fight, and we may not. It's okay. I love CD at 3. But I got to tell you, and I won't bury the lead. We'll get it out the way. It's CD at 3, Micah Parsons at 2, Dak Prescott at 1. I have to say this. I have CD Lamb over Micah Parsons. And here's why. And I want to make this very clear. With what CD Lamb can do, and I believe, and you did a great job just diagramming it, but it was last year it was 6 touchdowns. In 2023, it was 12 touchdowns. He continues to get better. I think he was criminally underused with Kellen Moore. Obviously, you had Amari Cooper, and I was one of the first people to go out on record and say, I love Michael Gallup. I love Amari Cooper. I think CD's better because I think he can do more after the catch. I think he can catch just as well, and now the route running has become special, John. And so I think that we're looking at a player who could be a perennial 1,800, 1,900 yard receiver because, John, he also doesn't get hurt. They run him out the backfield. He's very physical. He's a demon after the catch. So that's why I switched him and Micah. Now, that's not to say Micah's actually starts of his career has probably been better than the start that CD Lamb has had to his career. But those two, I think that there's no way offensively you can get away with playing again. You probably couldn't do it without Micah, but there's no way you can get away defensively. There's no way you can get away with playing a game without CD Lamb. What's your thoughts?
So the reason I go with Micah is because I do believe he is the biggest reason. I'm not saying it's the only reason. I'm not saying it's 90% of the reason, but whatever the percentages are, I think Micah Parsons is the biggest reason that they've been able to win 12 games each of these last 3 seasons. Because, and I'm not saying it would be that way on every team, but this Cowboys defense for far too long has been, during the entire Jason Garrett era, it wasn't even up for debate. I mean, actions speak louder than words about how I feel about the teams under Jason Garrett. And I can tell you right now, my actions at training camp, where I almost never watched the defense when the field split up. Micah Parsons comes on board. You guys sit there and start thinking, should I watch the offense right now or should I go over there? Because it's been way too long for them to have. And he's such a force that all teams have to worry about on all any time he's out there. It doesn't matter where he's lining up. I just believe that he has such an impact beyond just, maybe his stats and stuff. And I think that if you took him away from that defense, like everything would just kind of fall to where they would just be okay. Where I think he elevates them to where you're like, man, this could be a top 10 defense because they have Micah Parsons and he's really entering the prime of his career. So that's the only reason I have him there. And I just feel like with CD, I agree with everything you said. Like I do think he can be 1,800, 1,900 yards every season. He is phenomenal, and just the way he's improved and his stats improve every single year, it speaks for itself. There's something about CD that's also connected with Dak. Just because someone's got to throw him the ball. You can run around and be wide open, but if the guy isn't throwing you the ball, heck. When that happens, CD has shown you he's gotten frustrated on the sidelines almost to a fault in a couple of games, and so. CD. I don't really have an issue though. I mean, you can that whole top three. You can pretty much put them in any order, and I wouldn't have a major issue. They're clearly they're the engine of this team. I mean, the season's pretty messed up if you lose any one of those three for sure.
And you know what's crazy? CD and Mike have both been very healthy. I say this when Cowboys fans start the whole Malik Hooker said he shouldn't focus on the podcast and Micah doesn't care and I'm like, if you take Micah Parsons off of this team, you'd be a fool. That's very nice. Like there's not another Micah Parsons walking this earth that can rush like that, 4.3, 4.4 athlete, legit 4.3, 4.4 athlete. They don't exist.
Yeah, I think a lot of the problem that we get with a lot of these things, and I'm guilty of it sometimes too, is you think it's like high school or even college where you're just like, I don't know if this guy's the best guy for the locker room. This guy's kind of a me guy or something like that, where it's like, but that's not how it is in the pros. The pros, man, it's about getting the best players, man. You can have, if you give me the option between the best coach team and the most talented team when it comes to the pros, give me that most talented team every single time. Like that just, I'm not saying I'm going to win every single game, but I feel very confident I'm going to win more than I'm going to lose because that's just how it is. And that's not just football. It's every pro sport. And so, Micah loves the spotlight. Micah's not without faults. There's no question about that. But I just don't see how this team would be better without him. People talk about they should trade Micah and get whatever they can right now. I don't think that you'd get what you'd be giving up and losing in Micah Parsons. I don't think that would be a great idea. And the thing I keep going back to is we can sit here and talk about it, and we could argue about if they should make a move or do something with Micah, and it really doesn't matter because at the end of the day, it comes down to Jerry Jones, and I don't see Jerry Jones, as long as he's alive, allowing a Micah Parsons to get out of the building. Like, Jerry loves that type of stuff. Jerry is just fine with him having a podcast and that being in the news and stuff like that. He does not care about that stuff. Actually, to a certain extent, I kind of think Jerry likes those players even more than the guys that just kind of go about their business and play well. Like, Jerry loves Charles Haley and Michael Irvin and Dion and guys that it was more than just about what they did on Sundays. And and Dez. I mean, Jerry loves those guys, and so because of that, man, I just don't see it. I don't see a Jerry Jones like I can't see someone walk in his office and be like, Jerry, let's try and work something to where we move Micah, and him being like taking it seriously. I just, I mean, I'm not saying that there's other teams that might not do something like that, but the way the Cowboys are structured, Jerry Jones makes the final decisions. And you can talk about his contract to get dragged out. You can tell me right now that Micah Parsons doesn't have a new contract in 2 years, that they're franchise tagging him, whatever. It might get ugly. I'm just telling you, I don't see Micah Parsons playing in the prime of his career in a different jersey than the Dallas Cowboys.
I completely agree, and I also don't think it would be smart. Micah's a really good football player. I think what happened is Dan Quinn got caught running so much cover one, so much cover three, camping Micah on one side of the field, and he ran into a good OC. Like LaFleur's a really good OC, comes from that Shanahan tree, and he got him. And that's not to say, well, the low hanging fruit is, well, Micah disappears in big games. That's not true. Like there is a scheme part of this that happens in football. There is a X's and O's part, and once a team got you, they got you. And so I just it's laughable, John. It's laughable. If you did a redraft of that class, Michael would go number one, and it's not close. Over the quarterbacks, whoever, he would go number one, and it's not close.
Who was the first quarterback? Wasn't Burrow in that draft? I don't think he'd go over Burrow.
I think it was Pickett. Let me.
If it was Pickett, yeah, he's definitely going one. I thought Burrow was in that class. I could be wrong.
I don't know if they were if it was Jamar. I know it wasn't. Yeah.
It was Trevor Lawrence.
It was Lawrence, and you know what? There could be an argument that Micah would go over Lawrence as well as he's played. Like Micah, he's under 25 and literally is a top 10 player and will be that till he's probably 30. In football years, that's gold. So like, let's not act like a podcast is slowing him down. It's not. And so I just think it's foolishness. Now, John, we hit on Dak, but I really want to get not deep, but I want to ask you this. Has Dak Prescott, the regular season Dak MVP, he's a walking 10-win season. Like, I know what Philly did in their secondary and all this, but they're rookies, and like the same thing we said about our rookies, there's going to be growing pains. Dak he's so sharp. He is a very accurate quarterback. That being said, John, do you see a world where he's good enough to get over the hump? Because you got him number one here. Him and Mike, I think, are on the hottest seats, and I don't know if they pay Dak before the season, John. I think there's a world where I don't know if it's smart, but I think that there's a world where Jerry says, "Hold on, let's wait and see." Talk to me, John.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. When they didn't get a contract done before free agency started, that became very, very real that he could play out this season, because that was the time when it would have given you the most help in being able to sign other free agents and do more maneuvers when the new league year started. And so when that new deal wasn't done before then yeah, it opened up the door to where, yeah, he could certainly be playing his final season in Dallas, which is wild to think about because, we've never seen really a Cowboys franchise quarterback go and put on another team's helmet. That's definitely not in the prime of their career. And so because of that, it would be so wild to see. And I do think that, yeah, Jerry wants to see more from him in the postseason before he commits $60 million, $55 million, whatever it is to him. And that could be a dangerous game because that could set you up to where you lose him and now you're all of a sudden stuck in the early 2000s and you kind of just got a revolving door of just okay quarterbacks, and that's not getting the job done either. And so I do think, to answer your first question, I do think that Dak is certainly capable of making a deep playoff run. He's seen too many things. He's played at a high level in too many games for me not to think he can't put together 3 or 4 really good games. And let's be honest, if you go back and look, like, I'm not even going to go back 20, 30 years. Just go up the last 10, 15 years. Like, if for a quarterback to win a Super Bowl, it's not like that quarterback just plays amazing every single game in the playoffs. Like, there's some games where, hey, the defense had to help them out, and they just played okay and stuff. So I don't think that you have to live in a world where Dak has to put up 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, 4 straight games, and that's the only way they can. I don't think that you have to do that. You might have had to do that maybe, 6, 7 years ago, but with Micah Parsons and this defense where it's at, you shouldn't have to do that to win multiple playoff games. And I just have seen guys like Stafford and Jared Goff, put together teams where, they've played good enough in the playoffs, and I certainly think he's on the level with those guys. And so, yeah, no, there's no question. Like, I think that the Cowboys are better off having Dak Prescott than trying to go to free agency or going to the next offseason with just like, well, we'll just figure it out. But at the same time, there is a part of you that goes, if they did move on, you kind of understand it a little bit just because it would be 9 years of
Yeah,
you kind of not getting past it. And so if you don't change that up, what are you changing up? And so that's not exactly what I could see somebody Jerry's age doing, wanting to do that at his stage in his life. But there is a part of me where there are teams that are aggressive that I could see doing a move like that. Now, those teams probably also would have moved Dak and got something in return. They wouldn't have just let him get to free agency and sign with someone else.
yeah,
But again, it's just like I said at the beginning. It's one of those conversations where you can lean one way or the other. But there isn't a talk show, ESPN, whatever, 100%. No, 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 this is what you do.
yeah,
No, it's not. No, it's not.
yeah,
And if you think that, like I love Dak. I would love for Dak to be the quarterback of the Cowboys for the next 10 years. Like I love dealing with Dak Prescott. Best professional athlete I've ever been around, and it's not even close. Like he is the
wow,
real deal, good dude. Like all that. I would love for him to be the Cowboys quarterback. I want to cover this team, and for the rest of my life, I would love for him to be the Cowboys quarterback for a long time. But I'm saying this. I've also seen him make some just plays in the postseason against the Niners, against the Packers, of some regular season games, the way he's played against the Niners, where it leaves you thinking like, maybe this just isn't the right situation for him, much like Stafford in Detroit, where you're like, you know what, maybe a change of scenery is exactly what he needs because he'll get with another team and maybe it just clicks for him there. Maybe this Dallas thing is just it's run its course. But again, I think that there's a far better chance you end up with a worse quarterback than you do a better quarterback than Dak Prescott if you roll the dice next offseason.
The interesting thing about it is both Detroit and the Rams have had success since that
Wild.
move. And so, I mean, it's sometimes ripping the Band-Aid. I'm not saying it's the best thing to do at all times, but crazier things have happened.
I'm not saying this is going to happen, but a wild situation that would make you think like about that too would be is if and one of the reasons I'll keep an eye on this team a little bit this year, but I'm interested to see what happens with the Vikings without Kirk Cousins because
Yeah.
there's no way that I think that they're better with J.J. McCarthy, not at least for the first few years, than Kirk Cousins. But what if they are? Like if that happened, I would be completely stunned. And I do think Dak's a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins, so I'm not trying to make that apples comparison, but it's just one of those where a quarterback's been in a spot for a long time. You move on from him, you're kind of like, do you really think he was the problem? I don't think he was the problem. Okay, well, let's see, let's figure it out. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see, but I certainly see a world where Dak Prescott went to, I don't know, Pittsburgh or Seattle, and they like win big. I don't know if the Saints or the Raiders or the Giants would fit in that, but there are some good teams out there that could have some ability to add a Dak Prescott, and I could see a world where the result is something similar to what happened to Stafford with the Rams, and man, would that make Jerry Jones sick if that happened?
I'm gonna tell you this: what I'm hoping for, John, and as we close, and man, this has been an amazing discussion. What I'm hoping for, John, is I always said I like Kellen Moore. I don't love Kellen Moore. Too much Garrett. Hasn't coached long enough. And listen, Kellen Moore is a smart guy, but I do believe even like some of the stuff with JJ Redick and him just jumping into a Lakers job. You can be a smart person, John. I think you're a very smart person. I don't know if John can go coach the Cowboys because at the end of the day, there's actual things that you need to have seen some things. You need to have went through some things. You need to know how to deal with people. We can say whatever we want about Mike McCarthy, but I will say this. Once he figured out scheme, how to get Dak going, Dak to me had his best year under McCarthy this year. I won't say he had the weapons that he had with a healthy Gallup and Amari Cooper. Like having those weapons, I could possibly call the offense. I think that the way he used CD and Dak and Mike being on the same accord. So I say all this to say, John, year 2 in this offense could even be better, minus the run game. I know everybody running back. I'm with you, but minus the run game, John, I still believe that could be possibly better. And so in that's a saving grace where, hey, if the defense just holds face and just holds serve, in the offense, you get a little bit more from Cooks. And then now Tolbert maybe overtakes Cooks at the end of the year. And he's a guy. Crazier things have happened, and that's what I'm hoping for. That's the positive side of me. The negative to all of this is 9-win team, you blow it up, and Ben Johnson is the coach next year.
I mean, that's funny you say that about Ben Johnson because I've given a lot of thought to that if they were to go in another direction, and just this is just interesting times because there isn't that constant, for over a decade it seemed like, well, it's John Payton. There isn't really that obvious name there,
Yeah.
and again with Jerry, would he want to go with a young guy like that, with like a Ben Johnson, or would he be trying to bring in like a Bill Belichick? And I can make arguments against all of those, and so it would be pretty fascinating. I can't say that I thought Mike McCarthy would be the person that replaced Jason Garrett going into Garrett's final season. So, yeah, that is a wild one, man. Like, who knows? Who knows who the coach would be? I really do think that Jerry would love nothing more than to see this work out because I do think that he loves having Dak Prescott as his quarterback. I think he really enjoys working with Dak Prescott. And it's funny because, that article came out last month about the, kind of, it said like McCarthy's growing fed up with the Jerry Jones thing. To be honest with you, covering this team and being around Mike McCarthy more and more, whether you talk about like in interviews or behind the scenes and stuff, and just talking to him and just being around this team over the last few years, I think Mike and Jerry are more on the same page now than they ever were. Like I think that he'd be more fed up with Jerry 2020, 2021 than he would be now. I think he's more used to the way things are done. Is it perfect? No. He's going from Green Bay to Dallas. Like he knew it was going to be run differently. I just don't think it was as different as he was expecting. And so I don't know that there's I don't look at Jerry Jones as like he's just looking for a reason to fire Mike McCarthy. He could have done that in January. You could have done that. They lost to the Packers on January 14th. You could have done that on January 15th and moved on. But he wants it to work with Mike McCarthy. But it's hard to want to give that new contract if you're not having that postseason success because that unquestionably is what's missing right now.
He's seen it through, and for all the hell that people give Jerry, I don't think he's done a bad job. I don't. I don't just hang on to that low hanging fruit. They've done some good things. They have to get over the hump. It's on the players. It's on the coaches. To me, and so I'm excited for this year, John, for these reasons because I like when the stakes are high. Like, show me. You know what I mean? Let's go out and let's play good football. Let's coach better. Let's do these things. And I think that you actually have some guys in that locker room who do want to do some of this stuff. And so I'm very excited for this year, man. Any final thoughts, John, before I let you go?
Yeah, no, I just don't want to sound like I'm being this Jerry apologist or anything. Like when you say that, I think you said it perfectly. I agree with that. It's that I just have noticed, especially being down here the last 13 plus years, is that it is kind of the low hanging fruit where it's like, yeah, we get it. He hasn't done a good enough job as their general manager. He should have hired a general manager. We get all of that. But I'm just here to say that if it was as bad as some people make it seem, like where this is clearly what's wrong, like they would not even be able to win double-digit games, let alone do it 3 years in a row. And so that's where I just feel like people are kind of picking and choosing at stuff. Like if he's that bad, then they're going to, at the very least, I'm not saying you can't have a 12-win outlier season, but then it's going to follow up with an 8-win season or a 5-win season or whatever. And they're always kind of just hanging around in there. Now, they haven't gotten it done in January, and that's what matters most. And he deserves as much blame as anybody for that. But the whole idea of just like, well, he's the only one. He's the only one. I'm just kind of like, I don't know what he said to the team before those Niners playoff games. I don't know what he said to the team before that Packers game for them to play like that. I don't know what he did that he's the reason that they had those type of performances in those games. And then why didn't he say that before the Tampa Bay game when they went, in the wild card round and won in Tampa Bay? Like, so what didn't happen there, or when they beat the Seahawks in Dak's first playoff win at AT&T Stadium. Like, I'm just like, I don't know. It just seems like it's kind of, it's certainly part of the problem, but so is a lot of things right now. But to just sit there and say, no, that's the only thing. I'm just like, I don't think that's the only thing, but it's part of it.
Yeah, I think he's more removed now than ever, and he's actually trusting the people around him. He's trusting the process, and maybe a rash decision or irrational decision may have been to fire him. He's like, you know what, we're close. Let's not just give up. And I get it. So there's part of the, well, don't let good be the enemy of great. But then there's part of, if you blow it all up and you're bad for 10 more years, or you're just awful, or you're Washington, or you just keep digging these holes a 4-win season, fans aren't going to like that either. So, it's better to be close to me than to be, on the outside looking in consistently, like season over in October and a November type vibe. And that's not been the Cowboys, and I don't think it will be this year. John Machota, thank you so much for joining this channel, man. I feel like this was one of our best work. It's probably between you, everybody that I worked with this offseason, but this was good because I think everything I do is draft centric and team building centric. I think this was good because we got to really talk about who's on the roster and how this needs to make sense this year. And I think that we hit a lot of points. So thank you so much for coming on, buddy. You guys make sure you guys follow John Machota, like, share all he does. And when it comes to those training camp videos, a lot of people could try to steal your swag, John, but it's only one you, dog. I'm gonna just tell you that on camera, man. So thank you so much for coming on.
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right, man. Peace.